there are some stories that our parents told us about themselves over and over. Can you remember one? An example of a story your parents would tell you over and over. Anybody? Katrina?
Mom was a tempting temp. That was true.
Oh, your mother was a tempting temp.
That was
And that doesn't mean a temporary worker either, no. She was a pink lady up there. What do you say, Felicia? Oh, the old walking to school story. Sure. Anybody else? Those distances get shorter, by the way, as generations succeed, because we didn't do it like our parents did. Carmelita? And she told that story over and over. Yeah, we've all had them. We've all had them. Well, like many of us, Solomon grew up listening to stories from his father. But King David's stories, his father, were legendary. Songs had been written about him. Everyone knew the story of how he'd asked the Lord for strength, and then a giant named Goliath fell before him while he was just a shepherd boy. In fact, Goliath's sword had been put on display in the National Museum back then. People came from everywhere to look at it. So Solomon had the advantage of growing up hearing those stories again and again, along with the advantage of having his father as a role model. It was one thing to hear a story, but to see it fleshed out. You know, don't tell me. Show me. Show me. And Solomon imitated David for quite a while. But then, as we recall from the last time, he turned off the path. So the story Solomon had to tell to his kids wasn't nearly as good. As Solomon grew old, his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord as God as his father's had been. There comes a time for each one of us, somewhere down that path with Jesus, when we'll be tempted to get off. Millions are desperately trying to backtrack from paths they wish they'd never taken. Maybe even some of us this morning. Certainly all of us at some time. We've had to tell people that our finances were a wreck because of some path we'd gone on. That our marriages were a mess because of some errant path we'd gone on. We moved in with someone we should have moved out on. We were possessed by out-of-control addictions. So people listening to us ask the question it pains us to hear. Didn't you see this coming? Wasn't there anything along the detour you've taken that set off alarms? And 9 times out of 10, there were red flags. The Lord did try to get our attention, but we ignored him. So there we were, exactly where we didn't want to be, exactly where our errant paths had led us. And now life was a lot more complicated. The prudent see danger, as we discussed some weeks ago, and take refuge. But the simple keep going and suffer for it. The principle of the path. And this may shock and baffle and even frighten us, but certain people, I've known some, get off the right path, on the side paths, after having had remarkable starts, and they never get back on. From this time, many of his disciples turned off the path, back onto the old, and no longer followed. As a result, they didn't have much of a story to tell. The story we will tell. Let's pray. Speak to us, O God. thy servants are listening. In Jesus' name, amen. Here are our sources this morning. The story we will tell in 12 minutes. One of the legendary stories that Solomon grew up hearing involved his father David and the story that Dan read to us earlier. The story of David and the previous king named Saul. It begins, as so many stories do, with the temptation to make it just another non-story. After David slays the giant, he is catapulted into the national spotlight. Already, he's a master musician. He's young, speaks well, is good looking, and the Bible also tells us he has a rare heart for God, something the current king, Saul, doesn't have at all. There's even a rumor which proves to be true that the prophet Samuel has already anointed David to be the next king. What's more, King Saul comes in second to David in a popularity contest. The women sang, "Saul has slain his thousands, but David his tens of thousands." Now, Valentine's Day just passed, but who here has ever made these Valentine shoe boxes for school? Ever make them? All right. It's a Valentine box. You make it out of a shoe box. Huh? Never had that. He grew up in a deprived household.
Wonder why.
Who are your parents? Anyway, their popularity contest in my day, now I think in this day it's different, isn't it? Where everybody's required to give everybody else a Valentine, is that right? Is that the egalitarian way? Not in my day. In my day, you gave Valentines to whoever you wanted. That meant some people didn't have anything in their nice fancy box, and other people's Valentine boxes were filled to overflowing. Which of you were the popular, just show of hands, which of you were the popular kids at school? Anybody? Oh, Richie, we don't believe that. We're in church, supposed to tell the truth. Huh? You were. Merciless. I believe it. Anybody else popular? Who was popular? Who were the popular ones in school? Andrew, I can believe that, yeah? No, Ed? Sure. That's all. All right, John. Glad to see somebody else out there. Yeah. Well, old Saul, you can relate to David because Saul, who'd been the most popular, doesn't take this too well. In fact, the Bible says he's very angry. The song they sang galls him. And it becomes the last straw. He makes David a fugitive. 400 men join the fugitive David, and they are all